We're going to jump in now with our legal segment. And we've got three top stories we're going to cover today. First, the ongoing brouhaha between George Zimmerman and his soon-to-be ex-lovely bride, Shelley Zimmerman. So we'll discuss what happened. And then next, the newlywed wife, the husband and wife are in their early 20s, taking a leisurely hike in Montana, and she pushes him off a cliff, and he falls to his death. We'll discuss that case. And lastly, a man in Albuquerque, New Mexico, saw that a peeping Tom was outside his little daughter's window pleasuring himself. The father beat this peeping Tom almost to death, and we're going to discuss what happens in this case. This is an interesting one. Okay, why don't we begin with George and Shelley Zimmerman. And joining us now, Adam Thompson, New York criminal defense attorney, Adam Thompson. You can find him at adamthompsonlaw.com. Adam, how are you, sir?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on, Andy.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to have you on, Adam. And why don't we begin with these conflicting reports, because the Lake Mary Police Department, where this altercation happened between George and Shelley, is saying that George didn't have a gun on him, even though Shelley in the 911 call was saying that he did. What's going on here?
Well, I'll tell you, the Zimmerman saga is just yet another mess for the Zimmermans all over again. It seems that they can't seem to stay away from turmoil or publicity or the press. But I got to tell you, when police respond to a domestic violence case, which is what this is, in the state of Florida, it's not up to either of the participants to decide whether to press charges or not press charges. That's totally a call that the cops on their own have to make. So when the police are called responding to a scene and they get down there, their job is really to investigate the location, gather whatever information they can gather, and then they make a determination based on all the facts if they think that someone should get arrested or not. So in this case, even if George said, arrest my wife, don't arrest my wife, or the wife said, arrest him, don't arrest him, none of that matters. It's totally a call by law enforcement.
Okay, but then if the police, I got to ask, Adam, if the police let George Zimmerman go after investigating, it appears that this claim that Shelley made that her father was punched in the face by George, I mean, if that were the case, then the police would have to press charges, and they didn't. So do you think, was Shelley just lying?
Well, what you just said is correct. If the police went down there, and remember, as it was breaking live, you know, the news, or every news channel was showing it, they showed George under a tree being detained, and it wasn't for a few minutes. It seemed to go on for hours. So they were talking to whoever was there, and from what we know from videotapes, there were several people in the location. There were some neighbors that were present at different times, and there's different, you know, tangible evidence they could get. Supposedly an iPad was broke. Well, look at the iPad. Was it broke? He had a weapon. One point she said he was destroying the iPad with some kind of pocket knife or switchblade knife. Well, did George have a knife on him? They said he had a gun. Well, did he have a gun? You know, you go through all the different facts. The father was punched in the face. Supposedly his glasses fell and broke. Supposedly he had cuts or a broken nose. Well, was his nose injured, and were his glasses broken? You know, so when police go and they have a 911 call with details like this, it's easy to follow up and see what's truthful or what's being exaggerated or what is an outright lie. And I tell you, for the time they were there, the fact that they didn't grab anybody or apprehend anybody and formally make an arrest after all that time detaining him, it shows that their investigation, at least at this point, found that he didn't do anything wrong. Now, that may not mean down the line that something may change. Maybe they get the iPad and there's videotape on the iPad that will show something happened, or maybe they look into it further and they think he did assault the father and that leads to something. But at this point, the fact that they let him go and didn't arrest at the time probably means that nothing's going to come of this.
Okay, and then what about Shelley Zimmerman with the 911 call? And let me just play a little bit of this, Adam, because I wonder if it turns out George did not have a gun on him, which is what the Lake Mary Police Department is being very clear in saying, that they did not locate a gun, that a gun is not a part of the story, and Shelley Zimmerman says this in the 911 call. Is it a crime to lie on a 911 call? So I want to ask you that question, but let's hear the 911 call.
All right, we do have units en route to you, ma'am. Is he still there?
Yes, he is, and he's trying to shut the garage door on me.
Is he inside now?
No, he's in his car, and he continually has his hand on his gun, and he keeps saying, step closer. He's just threatening all of us with
step closer
his firearm. and he's going to shoot us.
Okay.
He punched my dad in the nose. My dad has a mark on his face. I saw his glasses were on the floor, and then took my iPad out of my hand and smashed it and cut it with a pocket knife. And there's a Lake Mary city worker across the street that I believe saw almost all of it.
Okay.
He's sitting in his truck right now.
Okay, so Adam, Shelley is very clear multiple times in that 911 call that she's being threatened with a gun. If that turns out to not be the case, can Shelley be held for lying to police on a 911 tape?
Absolutely. It's absolutely a crime to file a false report, and particularly when you're calling 911, which is an emergency line where there's cops whose presence is needed all throughout a location to, deal with very violent crimes that could be called in. To be sent to a location based on serious allegations like this, when they're driving to the location, man with a gun, and possibly threatening to shoot somebody or use it, that puts those police officers in a heightened sense of security and alarm. They're driving there. They try to get there as quickly as possible. It's an emergency situation. Then when you arrive and it's not true, that's a pretty serious matter.
Mm-hmm.
Just there's been so many cases similar to this, where people call in false reports because they want to get police to arrive to a location faster because they think if they don't say something like that's going on, that the response time will be delayed. But, this isn't something you do. And if it turns out that he didn't have a gun, it may be that she's on the end of some false charges for filing a false report. Yeah,
because she already has a perjury conviction under her belt. And once again, the spokesperson for the Lake Mary Police Department said, quote, "Nobody ever saw a gun. A gun is not a part of the story. We did not find a gun, did not locate a weapon on George Zimmerman." So I guess we'll see if they press charges against Shelley, and we'll see what's what. Also, one final note on the Zimmerman case, and I want to get to two others with you. George Zimmerman's attorney, Mark O'Mara, the famous Mark O'Mara, has quit, and he has words for George Zimmerman. He said, "Pay me." So in your mind, do you think that Mark O'Mara eventually will get his $1 million fee? And what do you think the NBC lawsuit that George Zimmerman is filing, I guess that's my main question. George Zimmerman is filing a defamation lawsuit against NBC News for defaming him, making him look like a racist by editing that 911 tape. What do you think that lawsuit against NBC is worth?
Well, I'll start off with the Mark O'Mara question. He basically did this case on the fly, hoping that he would get paid through, obviously, any funds that George and his family raised through supporters, through their online video stuff. And I'm sure they did raise a substantial amount that is going to go towards part of the fees. They're also in the process of trying to get back funds from the state, because since George was acquitted, he's entitled under state law in Florida to get back the cost of some of the litigation expenses. And that can add up in this case to a couple $100,000. So
mm-hmm.
can go towards paying some of the fees. But in terms of everything else, listen, Mark O'Mara just got a gig working with CNN, so he's doing other stuff now. His time's going to be occupied. I'm not so sure he's so worried about getting paid from the Zimmermans as a result.
But do you think, and Adam, just asking your judgment here, do you think he has an agreement in writing with George that says when George is able to pay, that he will pay? The reason why I ask, let's say George gets a $2 million book advance. Could then George say, hey, I'm not paying you? Or do you think that Mark O'Mara has something in writing that he has to pay when he has the money?
No, absolutely, 10 million %. It's going to be something in writing in a retainer that says, if in the event you come across funds later on, I will get paid X amount.
Gotcha. Okay, so then he has a legal claim to the money.
May take a big case like this purely for the reason that, look at the publicity. This case was covered day and night on almost every network live from beginning to end. So the amount of press and exposure that Mark O'Mara and his firm got as a result of this is, you can't even measure that.
Right. Plus, Mark O'Mara himself can write a book and get in advance. Right. Okay.
Absolutely. Listen, every big notorious case that's been done in the last 20 years ends up in 3 or 4 different books from every different person involved, from the judge to the prosecutor to the defense attorney, and then it's made into a movie on one of these channels. So I'm sure there's a lot more to come in terms of this, and there'll be money for the Zimmermans, and Mark O'Mara will get paid one way or the other. Okay, cool. Let me reintroduce Adam Thompson, New York criminal defense attorney. You can find him at adamthompsonlaw.com. And Adam, speaking of New York, by the way, did you vote for Anthony Weiner today? I did not actually vote because as of right now I'm actually residing temporarily out of the state, so I didn't get to vote. But it would have been an interesting election who to cast a vote.
Right.
Probably voted for de Blasio if I had a pick.
Okay. Let's get to our next story, Adam. And this is a newlywed couple in Montana. early 20s, going on a romantic hike in Glacier National Park, and she decided to push her husband off a cliff, and he fell thousands of feet to his death. And she reported when she came back from the hike that she got in a fight with her husband, and that she just basically walked away from him, and that he was still hiking, and then he went missing, and there was a search party, and nobody could end up finding him, and then they found his dead body, but they thought that he just fell off a cliff. It turns out that she has admitted now to pushing him off a cliff. What would she be facing for this type of thing? Is that a murder too? What is that?
Well, that would be, it wouldn't be a murder one charge, which involves premeditation, unless she plotted to get him there beforehand and had the intentions of pushing him off once they got there. But it doesn't seem that's the case. It seems like they were going through marital issues, and, they just went on this hiking trip as a way to talk and maybe get away from everything. And once there, in the middle of an argument, she just seemed to fly off the handle and then just pushed him she put both hands on his back and just pushed him forward, and he fell off the side of this. So I'm assuming at the worst it would be like a murder second degree, but maybe some kind of manslaughter. So I'm sure once it goes forward, they're going to say it was a heat of the moment argument and accidental. It may never even get to the crime of passion stage. She may just say, I pushed him forward, not even realizing how close he was or that he would lose balance and fall off, and it was a negligent homicide. And
okay, that's interesting.
Remarkable is there's no one there, there's no witnesses. If she just, if she lawyered up right away, I'm sure the first bit of advice she would have been given is if you don't make a public statement, if you don't speak to law enforcement and keep your mouth shut, and if this was, if you're in New York and you have a criminal problem, you come to me, the law offices of Adam Thompson, this is what I'm telling you. You never make statements to law enforcement. If you're listening on the Andy Dean, never make statements to law enforcement.
You've made all our police officer listeners just cringe right now. But so you're right. If she had just said, oh, he fell, depending on how believable this chick is, she probably would have gotten away with it. But I got to ask, this is a quickie divorce, we'd agree. If she goes to jail, is she not entitled to any of the marital assets? Let's say this guy had money. I'm guessing if she killed him, she doesn't get any cash, right?
Well, that's an interesting question because technically surviving spouse gets stuff. But if you're the person who kills the spouse to begin with, are you technically entitled to anything? If it turns out that they were going to be divorced, then, the property that's his would go probably through his estate and to whoever he would leave it to next in his, lineage. So whoever that would be. Because obviously, if they were breaking up and they weren't going to be together, she would have no rights in that stuff regardless. They would just split it up and they each go their own way.
Okay, but in general, if you kill your spouse, are you, by that act, you waive your rights to any marital assets?
Right. I think that would be the position. I think that's what the law would support. Because then you'd have a lot of people out there marrying above their means and getting rid of their spouse as quickly as possible and become rich overnight doing inheritance.
Right. That's a good point. I didn't think of it that way. That's very true, Adam. That's a good point. All right. Our final story, and this is a case I think we're going to empathize with the aggressor. And that was Emilio Chavez, who was walking outside his house, and he saw a peeping Tom touching himself next to his little daughter's window, and she was sleeping next to the window. And so this guy, Emilio Chavez, the father, walks over to the peeping Tom and beats him senseless to the point where this guy, he didn't die, but he's at the hospital recovering. I think that's a wonderful thing. I think the dad did the right thing. I think peeping Tom should be beaten. But apparently this father, who was just protecting his young daughter, is going to face felony charges for beating this peeping Tom. How could this be?
It's mind-boggling, but, the theory behind it is, law enforcement doesn't want people going out there doing street justice or vigilance. And even though right about everything, about what he did, when you hear it from a gut reaction, you really don't want street justice like that where people could nearly be killed or something like that could happen. But I got to tell you, it's unbelievable to think that the charge that the person as the peeping Tom did is going to be less, and he'll face less time and get in basically no trouble for doing what he did as compared to the father protecting his family, who's now probably going to face a felony assault charge. Who knows if they'll even say because he beat him and didn't stop, an attempt murder charge, and he'll probably face 1 to 3 years in jail over this.
So you're saying that the peeping Tom could serve less time in jail than the father protecting his young daughter?
Unbelievable, but that's how if they were to go forward with the case, a peeping Tom would be charged probably with a minor misdemeanor, and the father would be charged with a felony assault, if not more. And the felony assault, even if they just stop there, is like a 1 to 3 year prison term.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you this. Any jury in New Mexico, because we air there on the #1 station in Albuquerque, we got to turn this guy loose as a people. We make those decisions on juries, no matter what the law says. If you beat a peeping Tom, I think we can all agree that we protect the dad in that situation. Now, Adam, that be maybe a counterculture public service announcement, but I'm still willing to make it.
Hey, listen, if your family's involved and you're doing something to protect your family from harm, you got to do that. That always comes first.
Right. What about also, Adam, the idea that he was on the guy's property? I mean, isn't he defending his property from a guy who's pleasuring himself next to his daughter's window?
And listen, at the time he finds him, how do you know it's not going to escalate? It can go from that to going into the room and trying to attack his daughter.
Right.
You know at the time what's happening, so you're just responding. And if you're responding to protect your family on your property, hey, you got to do it.
Yeah, I think that he is going to get off, no pun intended. I think that the father is going to walk in this case, as he should, and the peeping Tom will go to jail, and then they'll have fun with him in prison. All right, Adam, I got to jump, but I want to thank Adam Thompson, New York criminal defense attorney, AdamThompsonLaw.com. Adam, thanks for your time, man. I appreciate your analysis. Good stuff.
Hey, thanks, Andy.
All right, brother, take care.